Once again, we have pissed off the racists. I'm letting people know we're over here now. You come in while I'm doing that. I got pulled for spreading false information. Uh, yes. Um, Hopefully people will see as I post the video and people can come in as they see it. Hey everybody, I'm moving my little ass over to here, seeing as so this video has made me realize. Sorry, it's loud on my phone already. Um, Apparently I was spreading false information. We know how offended the racist can be. Thank you. It's my Christmas sweater with a unicorn. I never had Christmas sweaters until Jay, and Jay bought me Christmas sweaters, and he buys me Christmas sweaters, and so I finally have Christmas sweaters. I need to get this thing to stop tracking me. It's going to drive me nuts. Okay. Like, that's going to drive me fucking absolutely insane if it continues to track me everywhere I go. But Jay buys me Christmas sweaters, and he saw this, and I saw it actually, and I was like, "Oh, that's so fucking cute." So he's like, "Oh, I'm grabbing it," and it was on sale. So I got this one, and then I've got one that I almost wore today that's got pink flamingos on it. I like anything bright and colorful, and he knows that. He's like, "That's black on black. That's not colorful enough for you." So I was like, "Oh, you're right. I've got to go colorful." So apparently, apparently stating where the Constitution actually comes from and stating what the 13th Amendment actually states is spreading false information. And so I sorry, it's new. That's what I needed. Okay. So I got tagged for spreading false information. I will I've repealed it. We'll see if it comes back. If not, it's up on the 20th. And so we'll go back onto TikTok on the 20th. We'll just be over here until the 20th to keep that back up. And I'll go ahead and I'll start posting on TikTok that I will be doing lives over here. So if you watch my channel, they should pop up. I'll make sure I'll try and also well, I'll alert on here ahead of time so people will see. So if you're subscribed here, and then I'll put out a couple of videos to draw over here. It might actually be a little bit easier, right? Well, and it says for educational purposes. It's taken down even when it says for educational purposes on me. I'm not even kidding. Hey, Sleepy. I'm not even kidding. Like, I have had things like I have lives, I have videos that say education for educational purposes only, like all of it. And I have still had them banned. And I'm like, and the only thing that I can figure is that the shit that I'm talking about, everybody's not comfortable with, right? Like, so my understanding is the app comes from Asia. And I know that there's a lot of racism in Asia, right? And that racism within Asia is not the same racism that's within the United States, right? Because there's not as much, there's a lot of diversity, but that diversity isn't the global diversity as it is elsewhere, right? And I'm not saying that there are no people that are black in Asia or no people that are darker. What I'm saying is that the racism within Asia is Asian specific, right? Like so within Asia, there's a lot of racism that states that different Asians are better, right? Like it doesn't look at race as red, yellow, black, and white. It looks at race as deeper, right? So within Asia, there's so many different races. And so I know that there's racism within Asia and it doesn't follow the same lines that the racism within the rest of the globe follows, right? One of the reasons is because the vast majority of Asia was never conquered by Britain, right? And because the vast majority of Asia is never conquered by Britain, then the racism that it has doesn't follow along the British lines of racism, right? So it might be that my shit triggers that as well, right? Like, well, and I'm not saying that that is better or okay, but that it because it is so it's stating none of that works, right? Um, because it's stating that none of that works, there are people that can't handle that stating of none of it works. I don't think it's as much of a caste system. Caste system is a different specific, but it's more of a nationality system than a race system, right? So again, othering happens everywhere, and othering has happened since we started ownership, right? Since we started the need to have hierarchy, stratification. We don't really see any evidence of it before that. Um, of course, we don't have a lot of evidence anyways, right? So maybe it did happen, but we don't see evidence of it beforehand. And when we look at societies pre that thought process that still existed later on, we don't see evidence of it. So it's definitely a sense of othering. Caste system. So Indian caste system is a place of birth, and it absolutely has a lot of skin tone to it. But they're all considered like they've all lived in India the entire time, right? Different people have been higher in the hierarchy in different times. Um, Whereas in with other parts of Asia, it comes into Korean versus Japanese, right? North Korean versus South Korean, Chinese versus Japanese, right? And those things are about nationality. Sometimes they have some color differentiation to them, and maybe some like eye structure differentiation, because again, eye structure, the inner globe, the inner fold, is usually along latitudes that are more of a snow covered latitude, because that's what it's for. It's for the reflection of the sun from the snow, right? So there is some skin tone shade difference and there is some eye difference, but there's not like the large differences outside of that. But it you can see those differences within specific nationalities. So it's all about the nationality. I did. For spreading false information, I was talking about the 13th Amendment not actually canceling out slavery, just changing it from chattel slavery to indentured servitude. Um, and I was talking about that, and then I had spoken about the Constitution, the Iroquois having the Constitution, and howing even the foundation of the system is based in the racism of appropriating somebody else's document and twisting it, right? And I got booted for spreading false information, harmful false information, um, which is a lot of the time what I'm booted for, if not for spreading violence or hatred. I did appeal. We'll see if I get it back. If not, it's up on the 20th, and I'll just stay here until then. By then, hopefully, well, maybe because, like if I can't, I have somebody who's going to help me. I think it's Gong, but their name is different in the thing. So it might not be. No, maybe it's not. It's somebody else. I do have somebody who is going to help me figure out how to get to live stream both of them from the same camera. But until, TikTok puts me back, I'm just going to live stream over here. Uh, and we'll just go from there because I'm just not, whatever. Like, I put out a video up on TikTok, and I said, I get that you're scared. And so you feel that you need to silence people because you're scared of accountability, but that's cowardice. And I'm just not dealing with it. Like, fuck off, right? You can find me on YouTube until then, right? Like, and so I'll be over here until then. And I'll keep my regularly scheduled. I'll probably do a couple more this week than I would normally do just because I'm leaving Friday and I'll be gone until Wednesday, Thursday, and I'm not going to do TikTok so I'm up north. So yeah, I got booted for spreading real truth. Well, and the thing is like, I get it. I do. That's the problem is I get it. I see it and I understand it. And what I see and I understand is fear. And what it is, and It was said very beautifully on the news by a beautiful Black woman at the start of the George Floyd, like, across the country, right? Um, Probably, I think, end of June, and a woman, and I wanna say, I think it was after the shit when, Trump cleared out, a place so that he could do his upside down Bible pictures. And a woman stated, "The issue is they're afraid that we're going to treat them the way they treated us. They fear we want retribution instead of understanding that we just want equity," right? And I think that that's perfectly said, right? The fear is that people of color are going to treat white people the way that white people have treated people of color. There is a failure to recognize that people of color, not because of their color, but because of what has happened within that, right? Don't look at it the same way. They don't look at it so much. And again, I want to always double down. This is average. This is not monolithic. There are people within every space that look at it at a very capitalistic angle, and there are people within every space that look at it from a very animistic angle, right? But for the vast majority, most people of color aren't looking for retribution. They're not looking to return the favor, right? Like, it's not like you have people of color out there going, I just want to beat the shit out of somebody, or I want to, like, nobody's looking to lynch anybody. Like, nobody wants that shit. That's shit. Nobody wanted it to start with, right? So I think the base fear is, and I think she hit the nail on the head, and she said it right on. It's not about that. People, white people think it's about that, but it's not about that. I just want to stop living in this shit, right? I don't want to make your shit. I just want to stop living in myself, right? And I think that that's the real deep fear, that they're going to be treated the way they treated everybody else. And if that's the only concept that you have of humanity, like, if you really believe, because so many people do, that what it is that we are, sorry, I can't look at you and see myself, which is difficult for me because I can't do that and hold a conversation with you. I have to be able to kind of see both, because I have to have a conversation with somebody. So it's kind of like having a conversation with ourselves. Um, we see that, uh, for for white people, there's this fear that they're going to be treated in this way because it's the only concept that they have. They don't have a concept that there's another way to be treated, right? They don't have a concept that, that kindness is key, because they haven't been taught that kindness is key. They've been taught that kindness is earned. They've been taught respect is earned, but they've been taught that the base respect is the respect you give a drill sergeant, not that the base respect is the respect you give another human being. And because this whole society conceptualizes this whole thought process that respect is earned, and kindness is earned, and basic human decency is only given to those who are deemed worthy of basic human dignity, right? And because that is the only concept that they don't have the concept that other people don't conceive it like that, because none of us have the concept that other people don't just conceive it the way we conceive it. We're going to see everybody as conceiving it in the same way we conceive it, right? Um, and so it is absolutely that lack of ability to conceptualize another thought process. Um, and because they're taught that evil is innate in the core of who we are, because original sin, right? And so we're innately evil and we're innately faulty, and that you can't change that and you can't fix that. You can only do your best to not display it, right? They're not taught the idea of, kindness. They're not taught that that's a key part of who we are. So they're not taught that they can actually do it without struggling towards it, right? And so it's always a struggle to being it. Um, at the same point, being taught that it is only given to people who have earned it, right? Which is how you see shit like, what did George Floyd do? Nobody should fucking know anything about a possible fucking past $20 bill. Nobody should know. That had nothing to do with that. Not a goddamn thing. Had nothing to do with George Floyd. George Floyd was pulled over and terrified. And instead of treating him with compassion and kindness and understanding through his very verbally described words that he was terrified, that he had had prior bad interactions and he was scared, they used a torture technique from the 1800s that we stopped using after the Salem witch trials because we deemed it too fucked up. Nobody should have ever known about a $20 fucking possible fake, right? All that needed was shit. Listen, I understand that you've had bad interactions with the past. I'm going to step back so that you know you're safe and let's have a conversation. You can go ahead and put your hands down. I don't fucking care. I'm not going to harm you. And I don't see you as a threat sitting in your car. Human to human, right? But because the culture and society within the United States that is predominantly white people, uh, this specific culture, not the United States, has that. That doesn't work any better either. Sorry. We're going to do this a couple times until I figure it out, just because that's the way my brain works. Because of that, you see that there is not that there's this fear. It's not about whether or not it's not about whether or not it's going to happen. It's about the fact that because they can't perceive or conceive of anything else, that's the only thing they can perceive and conceive of happening, right? And so accountability looks scary as fuck. Accountability, instead of looking like I said this, instead of accountability looking like acknowledgement and work to change, right? I see that I fucked that up. I'm going to work so I never fuck that up again, right? Instead of accountability looking like that, right? I'm going to do what I can to repair the situation, right? They see accountability more in the idea of retribution. They see it in fearful eyes. And because they see it in fearful eyes, they're terrified and therefore it's hate. They can't perceive it being true. So it must be disinformation. And there's really not else to do about it, right? There's really nothing else that one can do in that situation except for educate and hope that you can see. And that's why I really am trying to. So if I can use the logic that you use to get you to see the fallacy of your logic, then I can truly change your logic, right? If you think that you are a logical creature and your logic states something, then I can use the logic to show you the fallacy of the logic so that you can see that there is a different logic that is as logical without the fallibility. Right. That's, oh my God, that's scary too. I mean, that's a different time. So the likelihood of that, being like right on top and police being called right away, I mean, might be a little bit less, but that's still a scary situation, right? And the thing is unless you're passing several counterfeit bills, the likelihood is that you're not the counterfeiter. The likelihood is it was a good counterfeiter and they were able to wash it. And so a bank has given you counterfeit bills or a store has given you a counterfeit bill. That is the most common and the most likely of that scenario. That's what we see over and over and over and over again in that scenario. Unless you are somebody who has a stack of counterfeit $20 bills, you're not the counter fucking fitter, right? You were the end product of a system that washed for the counterfeiter and didn't actually look close enough, right? But that's not you, right? And that's the fucked up, right? Yeah. Well, and I think, like, if we look back at it, we see so much disconnect in so many different places, right? Whether it's through the training of disconnect through religion, through the training of disconnect through different societies, and then we also get the disconnect of removal, right? Whether it is removal from a continent to another continent by force without being able to bring your past with you, right? um, or it is removal as a child from one place into another place, or just any level of that removal, or removal of people from a land and pushed into another land. Any level of that removal really brings that disconnection, right? Because it breaks the connection that's there. As beings, we are so rooted in family and community. It is so necessary for us. And not only is it so necessary for us in our survival, but it's so necessary for our mental state, because any break in the safety of our nurtured childhood creates break in mental, creates brain changes that they can document, right? Um, it also, it creates this abandonment within us, you know? Yeah, I figured it had to be something along those lines, Mellow, because with your great grandfather, we're not looking at the 60s swoop, but that stopped after the 60s swoop. It didn't start with the 60s swoop. The 60s swoop was, the last. There's documents where you can see where they actually sold Indian children in the late 1800s, early 1900s still. And I state Indian children instead of indigenous children because it's documented, sending you one little Indian boy for $10. Thank you for your contribution, right? So you see this happen constantly, and many people want to see kindness in that, but it should be known at the time frame that we are talking about a society that believes that children is free labor, your own, others, cheap to free labor, right? This is why we get labor laws for children, right? Because of the idea that you could employ children cheaper, um, that having children gave you the right to their labor, and that hold on a second, I need to do something here. I have a excess child in my house right now, as my partner's child needed help with her child, and so I've been trying to keep them out of the office because he's a little demanding for a catitude, and so I needed to close the closet so he can come in. But he's whining at my door. He's a very loud child. So we have this disconnect, and this disconnect really comes from that. We have this time period where there is this idea that children literally are labor. And we see this reflected currently. Like, there's a video that I did on TikTok about there's been articles being done all across the board where we're talking about boomers are being pissed off that their children aren't taking care of them. Like, there's this expectation from boomers that their children should be taking care of them as they get older. And their children are like, yeah, fuck off. Like, you have me for free labor. I, I really believe that my mother really put the idea of free labor into her children, right? I was taught that that's what a child was for somebody. Very much taught that that's what a child was supposed to be, was free labor. And I was very much taught that a child to be free labor was natural, and that literally, I brought you into this world, I can take you out. Had my son, my work is done. Uh, Children should be seen and not heard. Uh, though I was never taught so much of that because I was taught to question things, but I wasn't taught to question her, right? Was taught to question things like, why is the sun the sun? Um, and the idea that you had your children to care for you in your old age. That was like literally the belief. Like that was a statement, you have children to care for you in your old age. That was a reason people gave for having children to care for you in your old age, right? Um, but this idea of children as free labor and turning children into free labor, especially within the United States, in orphan children, and then so we see a lot of that with the orphanages, and we see that with the orphan trains, right? That's what the orphan trains result was. It was free labor for people. People would come down and they would take a couple kids, and very frequently they would not raise them with kindness. They would raise them as labor because children were supposed to be labor, and children weren't supposed to have feelings, and children, weren't allowed any of that thought process, right? And so you see the orphan trains doing that, so any orphan, and then you see that they would pull children from indigenous spaces, and they would pull them under the thought process that they were indoctrinating them into the system better. It was reflected in the word and verbiage of "kill the Indian, save the man." It was actually stated, "Kill the Indian, save the child," right? And it was reflected in this thought process that by by doing this damage would give somebody the ability to convert. And conversion through damage was accepted, right? Conversion through damage was accepted. And we see that going as far back as things like the Inquisition. This is Stubby. We see that as far back as things like the Inquisition, right? We see, this idea that conversion through fire, this we see this with the burning of the witches, right? We see this forced conversion thought process within this, right? And it causes so much generational damage. And that's what really irritates me today when we see things like when we see people losing their children because of intergenerational trauma, right? So if I raise you believing that beating you is okay, in the thought process that I beat you because I love you and I need you to conform, and violence is okay, all of this thought process is okay towards children, right? Powerlessness is a common child feeling, right? And accepted, right? And then I don't teach you how to change that and treat your children with that. You treat your children with that, right? Um, we also see that addiction is because of intergenerational trauma, which continues that cycle of intergenerational trauma, right? But that when you carry pain in your body for decades, and for decades it is confirmed again and again that that pain was not only right, but necessary for you to be alive, right? So you can't hurt because it was necessary. You can't feel sorry for yourself because you can't pity yourself. You can't seek help because you're not allowed to hurt because it was necessary. And if you're seeking help, then that means that it wasn't necessary and that it caused trauma. And if you believe that it's right, you just pass it down. And when you're carrying all that weight and that pain, because it's painful to hurt people, to see hurt in somebody else, right? And if you're seeing hurt in somebody else, so somebody who doesn't love you has inflicted hurt on you. They're not displaying pain in their infliction of hurt on you because of the fact that they're not feeling pain, because they have that disconnect, right? If you can inflict pain on somebody that you don't know. You've bought somebody and you're inflicting pain on them to get them to conform, right? Uh, if you can inflict that pain and the societal teaching that that pain is positive, right? So you're inflicting that pain on somebody. So that person grows up to believe that they need to have this pain to conform because to conform is right, right? And so now that's doubled down and it's in everything and they see it on every return. Like every time they have a conversation, every interaction with the government, every interaction with the people around them confirms and doubles down on this idea that you have to conform in this specific way. And if you're doubling down on this idea that you have to conform on this specific way, then you conform, you carry all that trauma and it tenses up your body and you hold it in your muscles. You can't relax and you never even realize that you haven't relaxed. You conform, but in that conforming, you in turn inflicting that and that conforming haven't lost compassion for others. You may have lost compassion for self because you think that this is necessary. And so, therefore, it's not right for you to feel hurt that you were hurt because it was a necessary pain, right? Like, you can't feel hurt or angry that the surgery hurt you. The surgery was necessary, right? So, as you're inflicting that pain onto somebody else, your compassion comes into play. So now inside of you is this two diametrically opposed concepts. I can see the pain that I'm inflicting. I don't like inflicting pain on somebody. That doesn't feel right. But I've got to inflict pain because of this concept of society, right? But it's not okay for me to feel pain for this being inflicted upon me. It's diametrically opposed to state that it's okay to feel pain and sorrow that somebody is being harmed, but it's not okay to count yourself as somebody, right? Like, but it's a diametrical opposition that we have within us, right? When we have that concept that it's okay to feel sorry for others, but it's not okay to feel sorry for ourselves, right? At the same point, we're taught that, others can be dehuman, right? So that war within you happens and doubles down, right? Now it enters into confusion. So now you're inflicting trauma and hurting from inflicting trauma, can't change the system, have to fit within the system, or more trauma will come. Some of that trauma without this fitting within the system is kind of an esoteric trauma. So you don't even know really what that trauma is going to be and what form that's going to take. The pain gets to the point where you can't bear it. And we lose to addiction and we lose to worse than addiction, right? Though really, you know, one has a possibility of coming back from, but the damage that can impose is so long term and generational as well. So, which is it, right? It just becomes very problematic. And we see that intergenerational trauma is not blamed on the intergenerational trauma itself, but it is blamed instead on the victims. And even the word victim becomes a slur. Even the word victim becomes something that we shouldn't use, right? Instead of announcing or understanding that victim is somebody that did nothing to create the situation, right? That the situation is imposed from outside on a victim. So a victim holds no blame, not even in the fact of being a victim, but we've made blame in the fact of being a victim, so we can't even acknowledge that, right? It just doubles down and it goes through and through and through. And so, absolutely. And that's where, when you work with people who are dealing with that intergenerational trauma, especially to that extent, there has to be that understanding of it, right? And that's when we look at how to change that intergenerational trauma, there has to be that understanding that that intergenerational trauma is there as well, right? We have to understand that the reason these things are happening is because they're happening currently at this point, probably many times within a home, because we're not seeing, I mean, we're seeing some residential schools still exist, but many of them are governed by or taken care of by the nations, right? So there's a little bit less of that. But we absolutely see that if we can identify that as not a fault, but as an injury, illness implies that it's natural or isn't something that can be recovered from as much, right? So, injury, which is something that somebody has done to somebody and somebody has, oh, fuck. So, moral injury is the next thing I'm stepping into. Moral injury is really what that is. That's really a moral injury. And moral injury is an injury to the morals of a thought process, the injury to an ethics of a person, right? Where you have a moral thought process and then that moral thought process is damaged by people or society, right? And that's really, really what that is, right? That is intergenerational moral injury, intergenerational moral injury, right? Because it is that damage to the moral thought process that teaches that children are sacred, right? That the generations are sacred, right? And so that damage that changes the teaching from the idea that children are sacred beings that it should be heard in medicine in and of themselves. Excuse me, we're not going to do that, little cat. Sorry. That change of that thought process into the idea that children are labor or children are the bearers of original sin until you can beat it out of them, right? Um, so uh that's absolutely what that is. Yeah, we're here. We're lovey-dovey. He's a sweet little one. If I didn't already have three, it would be a lot easier. Um, Sorry, I got hair in my eye now. There you go, little boy. I think though that that's really where we that really gets down into that root that we were talking about initially, that pretty much everything within the United States is rooted in that racist structure, is rooted in that is rooted in that doctrine and discovery thought process and rooted in that racist structure. And in that rooting in that racist structure, um, what do you do, right? How do you fix that? How do you change that? Um, in that rooting in that racist structure, you have to first identify that it is that racist structure. And by identifying that it's a racist structure, this might be the best way, uh, get to the point that you can, start to change the things that you identify as that racist structure. I mean, personally, I just think we have to reset the whole fucking thing. But that's a personal thought process that we have to reset the whole thing. Um, and I'm not out here trying to lead a revolution, right? I have ideas, and I would be more than happy, but I think it needs a reset because to you can't fix what isn't broken. It's not broken, right? It was built to be this way. It was built to be this way. And if it was built to be this way, if it was built on that structural racism and built to be this way, that doctrine of discovery, that manifest destiny, if it's built to be this way, it's not broken. You can't change it. You can't fix it. You can instead reset it. And that doesn't mean like, again, we get to the thought process that just because white people seek out to damage other people doesn't mean that everybody else is seeking out to damage other people, right? Like I don't look retribution isn't the look, right? Retribution isn't the idea, right? It's not about harming others, it's about stopping the harm that's happening, right? So I think that people look at it along those lines too, and that's another place where we see that there is this great fear of accountability, right? Because if you can hide from it just a little bit longer, if you can silence it just a little bit longer, right? And really, I think that it comes down to that educational thought process and that understanding that that understanding. Sorry, my appointment had texted me. That the problems within the structure, not the people. And if the problems within the structure and what the structure teaches the people and not the people, then the people can heal it. And that accountability isn't about, you know, dealing with the sins of your father as much as it is about acknowledging the sins of your father and ensuring they don't go forward, right? Um, if you can get to that thought process, then you see it differently. And it's just about getting to that thought process. But how do you get people to that thought process, right? That's the key. That's the weird. And that's where the education comes in. That's where that understanding and that attempt to, spread that thought process and understanding comes in, right? Because if we can spread that thought process and understanding, if we can make this understanding happen that, you know, it's not about who gets to be the it's not about who gets to be ground under the heel of the boot next. It's about saving everybody, right? It's not about who gets to be the bad guy next. It's not about who gets to be in the mud next. It's about nobody being in the mud. And the pie doesn't fucking exist. There's more than enough. There's more than enough now. They just throw half of it in the garbage so you feel that there's not enough. There is more than enough now to feed every fucking person on this planet 6 times over and be okay. But we want to maintain that idea of scarcity so that we can continue that capitalism, which is pretty global right now. I mean, really, there's not a country really that does not have a capitalistic aspect of it, right? Because even when you get to the point of global economy, a global economy is a capitalistic thought process, right? Economy in and of itself, the idea of care for people being based on an arbitrary system that is made up, right? The idea of whether or not you live or die being based on an arbitrary system that is made up is capitalism. And that's what an economy is. An economy is an arbitrary system that somebody created. Barter, no. Trade, no. Economy, yes, right? It's all fake pieces of it's all fake pieces of paper. I mean, the paper itself is real, but it's not based on anything in reality, right? It's IOU tickets, right? And that's across the globe. Even coinage is still IOU tickets, right? And so when we can get past the idea of greed actually being beneficial, because globally, currently, greed is beneficial, we remove the benefit of greed. And then we stop this starvation because the starvation happens because of that benefit of greed. Um, I don't have my topics in the background, so it's a little bit different and it's going a little bit different. I've got to figure out how to get it to where I can do it differently on here and pull up different topics. And today, I don't know, I'm a little bit. I think I'm just way more focused today on how this shit's really affecting society because I can see and have seen for a long time how it really affects society. But right now, I'm in the midst of how it's done so much damage to me because of that effect on society as a whole, right? And so I think that that's why right now it just feels like the focus. But it's really hard for me, I think, right now to really think along or desire to talk about the older, I guess. I mean, not like I don't love the older, but my brain is just so stuck, which is okay because these are also topics that I want to be having and I want to be discussing um that we really don't get into a lot. I really want to be having the conversations and it might be easier to have them over here too Um, but I really want to be having the conversations about toxic gender roles and about toxic faith and about you know equity. you know and I really also want to be having the conversations even when I state shit like the theory of race is developed to, kind of give excuse for or justification for the, Europeans' atrocities at that time. Even shit like that is such at a risk of being banned that you just don't get into the atrocities. You don't get into the depth, the shit, right? Because there's just such a risk. And so I really try to steer clear of most things Homo sapien just because if I get into things Homo sapien way too often, it becomes such a risk of like today. Every time I get into something Homo sapien, it really comes down to somebody banning me, right? Which is, I mean, their own shit. Their own shit. Nothing I can do about it. And in the reality is, you're not gonna silence me anymore. I've been silenced long enough. I've been quiet long enough. I never was a quiet person. But I let my shine be dimmed for a hot minute because of others and because of society, and I can't let it happen anymore. So you can try and silence me all you want, but I got a message and I'm going to get it the fuck out. And that message is this atrocity is not us. There's a fucking better way. We are innately nurturing. We are innately communal, and we are innately curious. And we really like to have sex with things that are different from us. And we don't like to kill things. We especially don't like to kill things that we think have soul and life and perspective. Um, and the idea that we're the only things that have soul and life and perspective is very new. Um, we will feel better in our everyday world when we can get rid of the greed and the structure that is holding us in this space that comes from that stratification. And we will absolutely live longer if we can get rid of the climate destruction we're causing. Um, I don't know if anybody has any questions. I've been kind of rambling, and it's not like we have like hundreds of people in here. So pretty much everybody in here has probably heard half of my spiel a few times before. Um, so um, if you have any questions or anything that you'd like to talk about, please go ahead and bring them up. I'm probably going to take off at 2, so I have a little bit of extra time in between. Um, and do it that way. I think right now for me, it's becoming very imperative that it's becoming very imperative that we make enough change within ourselves as a society to move forward in a space where we can live together, especially as our population is increasing. We have to figure out how to be in harmony with each other and the world around us. Um, Otherwise, the reality is that, and she's been showing this lately, that the mother will just fucking get rid of half of us because that's too many people to have if we can't work in harmony, right? Like, uh, too many cooks in the kitchen if you can't work in harmony. You fuck out, right? So I think that in the end, we're going to see that there will be less people if there is not. And I don't mean as a result of the genocides that happen because there's always those, but uh, as a result, and there's always been natural disaster. But I mean, I think that it's going to become way more global in its disaster, just because and I think it's going to become way more climatic, as in the climate, just because. So I think that we really have to figure out how to kind of work together and get to that space. And I can just hope that enough like-minded individuals get together to get us there, right? The only thing that's ever changed the world is a small group of like-minded individuals, right? So if we can do that, you know, yeah, natural and unnatural disasters, right? Well, and there is a lot of truth to the fact that we're in a cyclic state, right? That we see time and time again where glacial maximums and minimums have happened throughout even human history, right? So some of it is very much the fact that climate change takes what we think of as natural and doubles it down, right? And climate change is so much natural. But when we double in our change of the biosystem, we really take it to another level, right? When we remove that biosphere, we really take it to another level. And it's that removal of that biosphere that turns fertility into wasteland. Have any of you guys seen that the chromosome for the Y chromosome is fading? Like we're losing the Y chromosome. Um, that there have been other species that have done this, and they're able to procreate without the male gene, so they don't have to have male to procreate anymore. And we're on our way to that. Because the DNA that it imparts, it's like 55 pieces of structure for the body. Like it's like nothing. And of those, the vast majority of them are not weight bearing, like they have no weight to them. They're just random. So we're looking at that fade of the Y gene, right? And really that goes into that population control thought process. It really grows into turning fertility into wasteland because we've created that space. We've created an overabundance without living in harmony, right? And if we've created an overabundance without living in harmony, there has to be a way to regulate that. And so nature provides, which has some serious irony in the idea that males have decided that in order to propagate our species and uplift masculine domination across the globe, we are in this stage, in this state, that decision will ultimately lead to there no longer being males of the species. The Loki in that thought process screams at me. The Loki in that thought process screams at me just so loudly. I think that that's fucking epic. And I think we'll go ahead and leave on that, actually. Let's go ahead and leave on that. Um, I will put out when I'm going to be live next. I will let you guys all know if TikTok puts my live status back up. Tomorrow or Thursday, I'm going to be working on setting this up so I can dual stream. So hopefully we'll be doing that soon. And then I will be back a couple more times this week, and then I'll be gone all next week because I'm going to go family. I adore you guys. Have a great day. Thank you guys for all transferring over from TikTok over here to listen to me ramble. And may the rest of your week be beautiful. Bye.